Hello, my little beasties and ghoulies. Welcome to Fear and Trembling with Horror, the podcast that brings you all things horror into conversation with philosophy, theology, religion, literature, mythology, anything you can think of. I'm your host, Jared, and I'm joined with my good buddy, Ryan. The basis of our friendship, of course, was in watching horror films in college together every Thursday night. And
Lord of Illusions.
Yeah, that's the first one we watched was Lord of Illusions. At any rate, we had a lot of fun, and we still like watching films together and talking about them and just analyzing them from different angles. On today's episode, we're going to feature the second part of a trilogy on possession movies. Today, we're going to talk about Scott Derrickson's wonderful film, The Exorcism of Emily Rose.
It is a terrific film. We, if I recall correctly, saw that in the theater.
Sure did. Yes, and I do remember that the priest in the movie is on the stand, and he keeps saying 3 o'clock in the morning he was visited by the demons, and somebody says, why hour? 3? And he called it the witching hour, and that's the inversion of the Trinity, and 3 p.m. when Jesus died, and all this stuff that it's all lore. And that night, by golly, I woke up at 3 in the morning on the dot, and I did for like 2 weeks afterwards. So yeah, that's fun.
That's really funny.
Funny how your body...
That actually becomes a running joke in, not a running joke, but a running callback in Scott Derrickson's films afterwards.
Does it really? I did not know that. You have to point it out when we do the next one.
Yes, if you watch Sinister and a couple of his others.
Okay.
It sneaks in.
All right, well, let's describe this movie. Let's give it an overview. This is another one of those movies like The Exorcist that is supposedly based off a real-life exorcism. Of course, it's in a different location with different people. Names have been changed. And, of course, people say they were there as testimonial witnesses, and they are making their testimony known. What's happened in this story is the combination of... I say this movie is the combination of The Exorcist, in that it is about a young girl possessed by a demon and a Catholic priest who needs to exorcise that demon. It's mixed exorcism, or The Exorcist, with A Few Good Men, because it's also...
Yes, I just thought about that in my head.
Yeah.
Is he going The Firm? Is he going Matlock? Nope, he's going A Few Good Men.
You can't handle the truth. Well,
Did you order the code red? You want me on that wall. You need me on that
The
wall.
body of Christ compel you. Yeah. Hey, listen.
The power of Christ.
He's like Jack Nicholson. He's wearing shades in the dark, going, "Hey, man, the power of Christ compel you, man." Just playing so cool. Do you want a sandwich? Okay. All right. So what happened is this: there's a kid who...
Here's Father Johnny. Wait. Wrong mashup.
Here's a kid who's in college. Things are going awry for her. She's from a very strict conservative Catholic family out on the farm, and she's having all kinds of physical and mental health issues. And the local priest, the priest of the family, gets called to come in and perform exorcism. Things go horribly wrong. Over the time, the story is told back and forth between the exorcism and the legal court case that takes place. Tom Wilkinson plays the priest. Laura Linney plays the defense attorney, and she is an atheist. She's a skeptic all the way through. The prosecuting attorney, he's a Sunday school teacher in his Methodist church. And
he's a real winner.
Yeah, and they got this whole combo of people. And the family, basically Emily Rose loses her life, loses her battle against the demon. And because of that, the priest is actually put on trial for, I think it's negligent homicide, because he did not get her the proper care she needed, i.e. psychological and medical care. She died under the strain of the possession or the malnutrition and everything else.
Yes.
And so he's defending, with the help of Laura Linney, some very arcane understanding of demons and exorcism, some ancient traditional views, at least middle-aged views, that is to say medieval period. He's defending them against a very modern rational, liberal, rational scientific worldview, even modern liberal Protestant viewpoints.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very fascinating as you get to watch the possession, and of course, there's the battle that goes deeper and deeper and deeper, and it's Jennifer Carpenter plays the character of Emily Rose, and she can do strange things with her body. She's very thin, and she can look like she's very stuck in catatonic ways, but that are very stark and scary themselves. And she does similar things that other possession movie characters do. The way she's being blasphemous, and the way she's screaming in languages and running up things and kind of doing superhuman feats of strength and bending her body in ways they shouldn't go. And Tom Wilkinson has the family and the community around him, even a local medical person there to track and see what happens. Meanwhile, he is on trial for his life, and he has to argue, and his defense attorney is a skeptic. So he's kind of trying to win her over, or the story is, as well as win over the whole legal edifice to the idea that possession and exorcism is a culturally and anthropologically viable reality across the world and the world's ages.
Yes.
And
that it was a viable treatment option.
That's exactly
he wasn't negligent.
That's exactly right. And so that's basically the overview of the film. So you have that good courtroom drama to break up some of the disturbing. I find possession movies to be exhausting to watch. And so these are good cutaways and good breaks in the action to kind of fill out some exposition, so it doesn't happen in weird, like, non-natural settings. It happens through
natural course of the story.
Yeah, of interrogation is what I want. Yes. It happens through interrogation. Meanwhile, the defense attorney, who's a skeptic, starts getting strange visits at 3 a.m, and even though she's doubtful, she knows the priest is a good man. She believes in him. And I think she thinks of them all as a bunch of bumpkins, are superstitious, but she starts to herself have some encounters along the way that starts opening up the imagination for the supernatural or the mysterious, or that which cannot be explained in her own life. Right.
I like how the father puts it, that she's seen the darkness too.
Why don't we just dive into the themes now? That's a rough overview. So is that one of your themes, the darkness and seeing the darkness?
I think certainly you can tell the priest has encountered something that has shaken him. Not necessarily shaken his faith, but just changed him in a way that he can no longer go back to his parish, which is interesting. I think the darkness kind of attaches itself to him in a way that he makes him very uncomfortable. So I think faith again is gonna play a large role in this film thematically, because you have the prosecutor who's a Sunday school teacher in his Methodist church, but then you also have Father Moore, who's performed these exorcisms, who is a parish priest, does priestly duties beyond the rite of exorcism. And then you have some of the other witnesses that the defense calls to help bolster this belief scientifically in different cultures and stuff like that. So yeah, faith is differently than The Exorcist, but in a very similar way that gets juxtaposed. One of the things that I liked was this film does a very good job of, well, is the defense right? Is she possessed? Because they show alternate versions of the possession scenes, which is not something a lot of possession films do. Whenever the prosecution's talking, it shows a different explanation for perhaps what is taking place in these different vignettes, these different scenes. And then whenever the defense is talking, it's the full-on possession stuff. So it plays with that faith and doubt in a different way, in a different experiential way than, say, The Exorcist did,
Well,
or other possession films do.
yeah, let me hold that for a second. I'm going to pop right down and talk about that after I say the first theme I see again is the battle between light and dark, or good and
Mm-hmm.
bad, holy and evil, and that happens between the priest and the demon itself. Just like in The
Yes.
Exorcist and any other film about possession, there is that battle. He talks in court about how 3 a.m. is
The
the
witching
witching
hour.
hour, and the demon was there mocking him to say what was it for? And he says to say the game is on, the game is afoot. This very kind of a Sherlock Holmes sort of phrase, in which it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
play well because it's not a game, but that's not what he
Right.
meant. It's like competition is on, competition for this girl's soul is on. But I would argue
Yes.
that what's really being done in this movie is competition for the soul of the world, because I think this
Yeah.
film is ultimately I think it is a set piece to talk about rationality and mystery.
Mm.
And I think it is a certain interrogation over the ways in which we come to know what is and is not. How do we know truth? Is
Mm.
it this old modern enlightenment position where things can only be known if they're scientifically verifiable, if they're rational, if they're empirical, if they're reproducible in different labs? Or is there other forms of knowing that can be called knowledge? And perhaps
Mm.
that's intuition, or based on authority or tradition or religion, or coming out of softer sciences like anthropology. There is that one defense witness who is an anthropologist who studied exorcism all over the world. And the whole point is simply to say, I'm not here to scientifically verify for you that demons are real. And like, I don't have one in my back pocket, but I am here to tell you
Right.
that it is a phenomenon seen worldwide over, that people have experienced these mysterious things that are not explainable by
Right.
tools of modernity.
That are cross cultural.
Yeah.
It's not just, yeah.
So I think that's really I think I think that's what's happening in the movie. And then on top of it, the packaging is possession, this
Yeah.
very medieval kind of rite, uh, and it even has the layer of kind of pastoral America, farm life, very faithful American, culturally conservative, value driven family down on the farm. You got
Right.
you have the kind of the morals of middle America right there, and then you have over
Or
here
fundamentalist America.
could
Well, I mean, is that?
could be. I'm not throwing stones, but
Yeah.
the point I think in this movie is trying to say, um, I don't think the movie. I don't think the point of view that Derrickson is making in this movie is that science and rationality are not a fundamental way at grasping knowledge. I think that the answer that they would give, or he would give, is that it's not the only way, and that in
Yeah.
accepting it so forcefully as we did after the Enlightenment, we have done so at the peril of other ways of knowing things.
Mm.
I'm thinking of other epistemologists and philosophers like Michael Polanyi, who might have something else to say about how we come to know things. But the distinction here is that the very Kantian Immanuel Kant, and people like Lessing and these Germans that would talk about knowledge being on the side of things that you can observe and test and quantify, and that's
Mm-hmm.
knowledge. And things that you can't, but you can't disprove either, like the soul or consciousness of a human, or the conscience, or heaven or God. That those aren't things you can know, but those are things that you can believe in, right?
Mm.
And you can believe very, very deeply. I think the question really is, we have. I think what the movie is doing is undermining that as a simple dichotomy. It's not
Yeah.
simple.
It's not simple.
There is faith on the side of science, and a lot of religious, supernatural, folkloric belief might also have some science that can back up some of the claims. Right?
Yeah, certainly he wants it to be a struggle. You said for the soul of the world, but also for the soul of the viewer.
Are
I
we
think
not part
he,
of the world, Ryan?
yes, yes.
Okay, thank
Well,
you.
that the way you said that though struck me as wow. Yeah, no, it's also yeah. Derrickson for sure wanted people to wrestle with the exact things that you're saying. I was very fortunate to meet him at a conference and actually get to sit with him throughout watching multiple films. in a like a group of like 15, 20 of us watched horror films with Scott Derrickson and got to hear him kind of talk about how he approaches the genre.
Kind of, or did you just hear him?
Did I say kind of?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just messing with you.
And he very much wanted it to be a struggle to wrestle with the, not just the knowledge piece, but wrestle with the darkness that surrounds us or that we encounter. And, you know, I think we see that struggle in the way he depicts all those things that you talked about.
So
and it's not an easy thing.
So maybe the real boogeyman for Derrickson in this picture is certainty. Certainty to me is not a position of faith.
Right.
It is the absence of faith. It becomes ideological. And it becomes a tool for our own comfort. If you want to talk about some of these masters of suspicion, Freud, Marx, Nietzsche, Feuerbach, you know, they come up with all these suspicious reasons why you might believe in something like religion. One of them is that, what is it? It's the opiate of the masses. It makes it, it's a crutch that makes us feel better or be able to engage the world, to make it through this difficult existence. But doesn't certainty do that as well? Just the sense of a certainty, even in science, like, and not only, it's not only a certainty, but then it has this very hopeful, positive look that science will answer all our problems. Right. Exhibit A, right? And E.F. Schumacher calls this the forward stampede of modernity. It's the idea that we just need to create human technology that solves a problem. And now,
if given enough time, technology will save us.
That fixes a certain problem. Like any problem you can think of, create something for it to solve it, right? If it's a perceived problem. And then we find out after having that developed and in the marketplace, it's actually doing a great deal of destruction to the world around it. It's causing problems, just as many problems as it solves. The forward stampede of modernity says, well, we're not going to stop. We're going to continue on with this, I would say, Pollyannish hope that future minds will come along and have better creative technology answers to solve the problems we made in the first place.
That we've made, yeah.
So, but in that, there's a certain sense of comfort, a certain sense of, you know, this is why people can put their heads in the sand over issues like climate change, or just pick a number of things that are facing our modern contemporary world. We'll figure it out. We have belief in science. We'll figure this out. But what if there is an element of science that requires faith? I mean, certainly faith is required in everything, right? You still have to have the trust to read a label, right? Before you drink something, right? There's still an element of trust, even if it's that base, although I think it's much more than that base. Faith is present everywhere. And also on the, sorry, I'm going on, but I just want to complete the thought to say that same thing with religious fundamentalism, where I have a certainty that my belief is right. It's the one that gets me to the good place, not the bad place, or whatever, however you
no, exactly how you said it.
However you can conceive of it. But once we have that certainty and it belongs to me, it becomes this weird thing that we possess. Yeah. And as far as I can tell, faith is not something that we possess. It should possess us. And I might say that science is also not a thing in and of itself. It is a process. So you can never possess it either. It's not a thing.
Right. It's never complete.
Yeah, it's never complete. One of the most terrifying things about the film, besides the abruptness of the possession and the body shape that Jennifer Carpenter excels at pulling off, and the haunting nature of ghosts or demons visiting you at 3 a.m, and that's done all suspensefully. I mean, just quite correctly, quite beautifully. But it's the fear that comes up from not knowing what to do to help people you love. She does go and get all kinds of care that's there for her, and ultimately that care doesn't seem to work, and so they call out to their parish priest, who they trust. Yeah. Then for the parent or for a loved one watching the person you care for go through things that you can't explain, just absolutely, I would say, universal human fear. But then
Yeah.
the inability to find the help that's needed, or the places that you typically go for help, are now suspect or questionable by the broader society. That's an alienation.
That's a good word.
That's an alienation from society in some way. Um, but as I said, also there are these other themes. You have the Methodist prosecuting attorney who, I believe, way they tried to make him out is that he's a good Christian man, but it seems like a lot of American Protestant Christianity is reflected on the immanent world, the flat, horizontal, the world of ethics. Like, our stories have morals in them more often than appeals to imagination. We tell the kids stories to get to a moral, whereas in the European and a decidedly more Catholic world, there's fantasy stories, right, that open up the mind to the mysterious and the transcendent. And that kind of faith, side of our faith, is lost in a lot of the mainline Protestantism, where it's not so much in Eastern Orthodox, the Catholic Church, or sacramental churches. So churches that appeal to the actual grace of God in ordinary things, like in the daily life and in the actions of the church. So it doesn't make sense to this guy. This guy probably has the belief that when the Holy Scriptures of the Bible talk about possession, it's just epilepsy, it's just psychosis.
Mental, yeah.
And I'm not here to say that it's not, and that they weren't just trying to use the best words in their worldview to describe that. But there is no imagination or possibility in the imagination for something more. Something that you cannot see, that can affect us on a top-down causal way. That means to say it doesn't emerge from us, but in a being kind of working top-down neurologically, right, into our bodies, right, to take over. It's interesting how much Screwtape Letters can come out in this, where you talk about, the greatest trick of the devil is to convince people he doesn't exist. The Screwtape Letters.
Doesn't he quote that?
Maybe. But for those of you who don't know,
I feel like
Screwtape Letters is written by C.S. Lewis, and it's this little pedagogical text about a chief like Demon writing lessons and letters to his nephew Demon on how to make Christians or believers doubt and fall away. And you see in the church a lot of people who say they believe, but do they really believe, or do they believe in what's been identified as moralistic therapeutic deism? That is to say, moralistic faith is about the morals. These are, I don't smoke, drink, or chew, go with girls that do. Therapeutic, it's there to make me feel better about my eternal.
Their portal might take you to hell, okay?
Yeah, it's there to make me feel better about my life choices and where I'm going to end up in the good place, not the bad place. And then deistic, so it believes in God, but it does not believe that God is very close. Rather, like the founders of our country, most were deists. They believe that God started the whole thing, but does not interfere. That's right. This is
a Christian nation, good sir.
But that God does not interfere in the inner workings of creation in any way, shape, or form. So Jefferson, just as an aside, his deist Bible, he's got an edit of it where he takes out anything miraculous, anything supernatural. It's a very thin Bible. And it's just a text of morals and wisdom then, right?
Yeah.
Not in God's kingdom prevailing in the world, so to speak. But I think that's terrifying. I think that's absolutely terrifying, because you have faith, not only in the tenets of your religion, but you have faith in its community. And these people were seen, especially in mid-century of the last century, these were the leaders of communities, priests, rabbis, pastors.
Yes, this story would have taken place in like the 70s. Well, the true events took place in like the 70s that this film was based on. And it was based on that. Like Scott Derrickson purchased or had rights to some of the recordings of the exorcisms that took place. And so while creative liberties were taken in some elements into the story, it is very much based on a legitimate case that took place in Germany, I believe.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he really wrestles with, and this is another theme, is how can a person of faith be possessed by a demon or by the devil? And that's going to come up in the end of this film. but it's something that he asked himself, Derrickson asked himself, and I feel like
because because what you're saying is that it has been believed that people of faith are protected. Their faith is the hedge of protection around their person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Why would God allow somebody who believes in God to go through that experience?
That is an interesting question. By the way, the real story is based on Anna Elizabeth Michael. She was born in 1952 in Bavaria, West Germany. She dies in Germany at the age of 23. And the negligent homicide is right here. So I'm just looking this up on Wikipedia.
Yeah, there were there wasn't just one priest, there were two.
Yeah.
And so there are some other creative liberties, but the themes are the same.
Well, if the court case dealt with the same content, it's interesting that it is German, and I cited two Germans about their epistemology, Lessing and Kant, that kind of really did shape modern Western philosophy. And these are things that can't be known or proven, but they could be tenets of faith. Or you can believe them. It's a softer sense of knowing for them. Whereas, like I said, people like Polanyi and other philosophers might have a more robust understanding of intuition and religious tradition and other things in the world of what we can know. So terrifying themes. If you ask me the question, what is this movie's presentation of evil? I'm not sure I've thought enough about that question in this text. I think it's very similar as the Exorcism movie we talked about, and very similar and in keeping with Augustine's notion of privatio boni, the privation of the good, or like a cavity. Again, last time I talked about how it was order caused by disorder. It's when good things are used for wrong purposes, right?
And that there is a battle between some force of evil, this in the embodiment of a demon, and the force and the force for good in the world.
Yeah,
here embodied by the church.
So yeah, Exorcist and the Exorcism of Emily Rose have that notion that there is some sort of spiritual warfare that is literal, not metaphorical, and it's happening for the souls of the world itself. That is true, but in essence, the demons still don't appear to be, or evil does not seem to be simply in essence a demon, because it's isolated one. So it seems like evil itself is larger than the one demon. I think it's more apt to say that the demon is one who chooses to act diabolically, is a creature that acts diabolically,
and that's possessing Emily's health and her body, like taking her volition from her. It is also that's not the only depiction, the possession and that whole conflict. Is it real? Is it not? Isn't the only expression of evil in this film. There is what the Laura Linney's character,
the defense attorney
had helped one of her clients get off, who ended up being reoffending, committing murder again.
Right.
And she sees it while she's in a bar, and it really affects her. And I think that's another picture of bad things that happen in this world. It's the $10 word theodicy, right? I'll let you explain that. But that's another theme. How the darkness, as it comes to be called, she feels it very deeply, that was an evil that was perpetrated that didn't have to be, and she was a part of what led to that happening.
Yeah, let's say theodicy for the sake of our thinking today is just simply that if God is good and loving and all powerful, how come there's evil in the world? Because if God is all powerful and evil's in the world, then God must not be good, because God would stop what's evil. And if God is all, the other way around, then he lacks power, right?
Right.
Those are questions that have been asked from time immemorial, and I think that I think there's better ways of asking the question, but that is the question that is asked. And at the end of this film, Emily Rose has a dream where she's visited by the Virgin Mary, Mother Mary, and she has the option of going to heaven, just ascending, just like Enoch, getting right out of her, or she has the option to go back and sustain the battle, the internal battle, and she chooses to go back for a purpose, and she succumbs to the devil, the demon, and she dies.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, the priest and the defense attorney stand at her grave. The priest is found guilty, by the way, but he doesn't have to serve time. His time served. And that was an appeal from the jury. Laura Linney's character is given a great promotion to become a member of
a partner in the firm. Yeah.
She turns it down. I think she's wanting to do better in life than just get ahead and make money and have the splashy stories. And so now they're standing in front of Emily Rose's grave, and the priest says, one day Emily Rose will be considered a saint. Because of what she's done. When she dies, she bears the marks of stigmata, this medieval teaching that, like a certain level of faith can manifest themselves as the wounds of Christ on your palm of your hands and maybe the crown of thorns. And she does that. One of the people who are analyzing her body, who's there, does not call them stigmata, just says that they are wounds. But nevertheless, for the priest and the family, it is stigmata, and she has been a sign of endurance and faith. And it's because she has continued the battle, kept the fight alive. I suppose that's the reason that she will
so that the world might know that the God is real.
So the world might know that God is real. Yeah, which is an interesting thing. Not sure how I feel about that. That might be, I'm gonna hold off on that for a second. But that's ultimately, at the end of the day, trying to look back at what you've struggled through and think it's going to matter to other people. Maybe that's just a human thing that the priest is feeling.
Yeah, and the priest
trying to find meaning in the suffering, right?
Yeah, right, and not only is he changed by Emily's faith and her vision of Mother Mary, but that's not the only person that's changed for the good. The defense attorney, she's changed by the priest being a good man. And I think she's changed by her story as well. She doesn't come to a faith, if you will, not in the way that you or I would define it, but she is struck by the epitaph on the grave, and it's Philippians 2, verse 12, and it says basically, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling.
Yeah, it's interesting how very works oriented, deeds oriented this picture is, which kind of it's kind of been argued in Christian thought, how much is faith and how much is works. But
yes,
and yes, we don't know the answer to her faith, right? Like, there is a certain I guess we would all be. For those of the people in the world who have faith, they would probably find it satisfying that she came to faith. And then there's
I don't think Aaron came to faith in the end.
I know.
Are you talking about Emily or?
Dude, I'm talking about the defense attorney.
Right. Okay.
That would be satisfying to some.
Oh yeah.
But the fact that the movie leaves it very vague and her still in her journey, I think, is ultimately more satisfying for how life really works.
Yes,
It's not
it
always
is.
neat and tidy and bowed and wrapped up in pretty paper. And in fact, when movies do that with trauma and evil, I tend to don't like not like them because they're not
Yeah.
reflecting the realness of life,
Right.
or they're just popcorn movies to me. They're not
Well,
making me
and
think about my own suffering.
yeah, and that was something that he Scott Derrickson gave a keynote at this particular conference and talking about this issue and wrestling and struggling with the darkness that we encounter, struggling, that it's not nice, it's not neat, and that epitaph on that gravestone makes perfect sense. Having heard that speech, that there should be struggle.
Yeah, so I think one of the tenets of Buddhism is that life is suffering, and many people who
Mm,
know anything about Buddhism know that the way to avoid suffering is detachment. It is to detach oneself from desire, right? Christian teaching, I think a lot of people misunderstand that it's not an escapist religion of escaping this world for heaven. And it's never promised that we won't suffer. I mean, Jesus says, come to me or follow me. And by the way, pick up your cross. You're going to die for following me. You're going to suffer for giving your life over.
mhm.
Paul has a thorn in his flesh that's never taken away, whatever that is. The
Yeah.
entire Old Testament is filled with the people of God who are yearning for relief and ease of their burden. But what is that all for? Might I suggest that it's
Mm,
all for our maturation?
mm,
That people who can't deal with a good, loving God and evil still persisting or difficulty still persisting, we might have the wrong paradigm put forward for for your sake of human flourishing. To
yeah.
truly flourish, you have to go through pain. You have to go through it because it's only through these things that we grow and then we mature. Just
Yeah.
simple analogy: exercise, the pain of exercise. You're breaking down your muscles to build them back up. The only way to become a better athlete or whatever is to go through that pain. And that pain you may hate in the moment, but it's for a purpose, right?
Yeah.
And to kind of bring it back to this notion of so I would say that even in the Christian church or even with the Stoics, there's this notion of accepting death, accepting it, accepting trial and trauma and difficulty, that the world is not perfect. And we go right to Buddhism. We said suffering's part of it. It really
Hmm.
is. Detach. And there's something very holy about that across all traditions, even the Christian tradition of
Yeah.
detaching. I would say detaching oneself from your expectation of the divine.
Mm,
How many people have lost hope or faith because they have one path in their mind, preordained in their mind that God could take for them. And if it doesn't go this way,
right.
I don't want it.
I don't want any part. Yeah.
But that's so childish. It's immature. To detach ourselves from expectation is kind of in a helpful way for us to grow up.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, and I think that's part of the fear and trembling. That's part of the letting go of those expectations and seeing where that takes you.
well, in Fear and Trembling I mean, that's obviously taken from the title of Kierkegaard's book, and this book is got many iterations of the story of Abraham about to sacrifice his son, because he's told to by God, and it's almost midrashic in how it's kind of retold in different ways with different emphasis points and different evaluations of the moral of it. But like, how can we morally accept a God who's good and all powerful, who says to the patriarch, "Now go ahead and tie your son up and make him a sacrifice. Kill your son for me."
Through whom I've said that you're going to bless the world.
Yeah, and there's going to be really nothing added to the life of God if God is the kind of what we suppose God to be,
What we suppose God to be,
what we
yes.
suppose God is or isn't, and at the very end, of course, when the knife's in the air, there's the sacrificial lamb that's discovered, and God says, "Don't do it." And it's actually kind of like horror. It's a horrifying story.
Yes.
It's very horrific, and there's even texts in the Old Testament called the text of terror, because there is horror in real life. But the
Yeah.
Fear and Trembling reminds us that there is a foundation for the religious life that it literally comes from above us. Usually we stand on our foundations, but
Yeah.
this is we're suspended from the foundation, and it is from this great beyond, this great beyond of mystery, that which we cannot explain, that which we cannot understand, that which
Mm.
boggles the mind because you can't contain it. That is from that place is where you get the path of life, the way of life to live.
Hmm.
He will call it religiousness A and B, but that's to get too deep into Kierkegaard.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
way beyond the ethical. It is beyond, right? So, is Fear and Trembling here in this film? It's present in that for at least the own personal witness of Emily Rose. She is choosing the more difficult path to be a symbol,
Yeah.
to be a wisdom, to be a
Mm.
testimony. Um, and I would say that so does the priest.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that is a perfect description of her and him.
Well,
I lost my train of thought after that.
that's okay. That's easy. Hannibal's bites, my friend. Let's move it on. Here we go.
Hello.
Is this Clarice? Oh, hello, Clarice.
Where did the film fail to you?
That's a tough one. I out of all the times that I've watched it, I've never come away with it disliking it. I feel like if I could say anything, it would be the shallow description of the prosecutor's faith. He is this, and it never showed him struggling with anything. He had that certainty that you talked about. And there was nothing, I don't think there was anything mysterious in his life. He had everything in a nice, neat, everything in its place. And this particular case didn't fit the place of faith for him. Because possession, like you said, is not something that can happen anymore. It's a psychological issue. And
I didn't
guess
say that. I said some people think that.
some people think that. No, I'm saying like from the prosecutor's perspective.
Right.
And so I think if I had any criticism, it would be that particular individual didn't have enough depth to his character. And it was I think that's my biggest criticism, that there could have been more done with his character to flesh that out a little bit. Although the movie would have been longer.
Yeah, the character is he's played by Campbell Scott, and he's got a great voice, and I agree with you on that. The other thing is some of the counter defense arguments on the stand. I wish they were a little more thorough to really show that real difficulty in choosing a side. I mean, I thought the anthropologist one was interesting, but I thought there could be more to even undermine the rational. I still, I get phone calls when people are talking to me about strange supernatural goings on. Someone actually asked me, they said that they think their house is haunted, and they told me about these things that were happening. And this was the other day, and I said, well, what do you think the ghosts? And I took them seriously, just to honor them as individuals. And I first, I decided I was going to have a meeting with them, and I was going to try to lead them through some ideas and thoughts. And, they were pretty resolute, so I wasn't going to question it,
Right.
or them to them. But I just said, well, what do you think this spirit, this person wants? Is it malevolent or benevolent? They said, no, I think it's benevolent. I said, well, maybe you can act with a spirit of hospitality. And maybe open yourself up in hospitality for another person,
Yeah.
albeit a ghost. Now, I'm just saying that there are times when I'm just open to things, but my philosophy of religion, my theology of the demonic and such, is that the demonic is not this powerful.
Yeah.
That it is almost seen as an unsurpassable enemy in the films. It is just, it's just too strong. And if that's the case, then then the theology of the whole picture is wrong, right, in the first place.
Yeah.
But I find that just to be an easy way to make it very scary.
Yeah.
So I guess no one has an answer
Oh,
for
and it's scary because it's it's dealing with those things that are beyond us.
Yeah.
All those things you talked about, the unknown.
Mm-hmm. Well, my friend,
It's interesting that our criticism of the prosecutor is also his, Derrickson's criticism. He had expressed that he maybe had wished he handled that character a little differently.
I was going to say, my friend, this is one of those movies that you and I saw in the theater years and years ago when we got back to where my house after we went on walks and stayed up really late talking about all the mysterious things. And
it was great in the theater at the height of the last possession scene when they're in the barn and I felt the air in the theater get colder. Whenever the demon said, "I am Legion." That was a fun experience. We're just like, oh, is it cold?
That's a cold spot.
Why did the fan kick on now?
Yeah, this is definitely when I first saw the previews, I thought, "There's no way." I've seen so many possession movies, and they all really are false, like just poor simulacra of the Exorcist. Boy, it's a mouthful getting all those isms in it, right? But it does something fresh, completely fresh. It has some of the same theological backgrounds to them, but how the story's told, what's the problem? The problem isn't just the problem here is not really a possessed girl because she's dead. That's over. The problem is whether or not the priest was negligent in her death. And so then you have to then go about proving or disproving or giving a shadow of doubt. And so I found that to be a really compelling way to tell a story.
Yeah, the film did a fantastic job of allowing the viewer to experience that tension, and it does that. It's a very good film in that manner.
Do you have any final words on this one?
I found final words. I for one loved the scripture on the tombstone at the end. Yeah, especially the way that the way it struck Aaron, the way it struck the defense attorney standing there.
See, I struggle with it because I think it individuates. And it makes everything personal when ultimately a lot of these things are held by a community and with and by a community. And she had a community around her. And I don't know that we can all work out our salvation, right, with fear and trembling on our own, or work out the hole in the center of us. So
what the epitaph doesn't say, the rest of the verse says, is right after the semicolon. For it is God who works in you both to will and to do for his good pleasure.
Okay.
Not for sure what version that is.
Right. You have to look at the Greek to see if it's you all or you. But the point is, even if you don't have, so I realize these exorcism movies really pull a lot on Christian themes, theology, and you may not dig that. That's perfectly fine, except for the fact that I think the movies are actually wanting you to wrestle with it. And but I would say that working out your salvation, fear and trembling, if that doesn't make sense to you in the way you speak, think about it like filling that gap or absence that's inside of every person, right? And doing so with a great deal of respect and humility. I'm not sure that that's ever best done alone. Certainly moments of solitude are important. And we are individuals, but giving over to the authentic self of the individual that Charles Taylor talks about, the philosopher, when he talks about the secular age, that everything's about me expressing my own personal individuality. I think that is the unwholesome or the unfaithful thought, because we are creatures made in, for, and by community. We are not meant to be hyper individualist.
And I think you see the defense attorney struggle with that. The further she's drawn into Father Moore's relationship that he had with Emily and his ministry with her and her story, the more she realized what her life was, and the more she saw herself and how devoid of true meaning that it was. Because her entire goals and ambitions changed, in that film. And she comes out of it kind of, whether or not you take the religious part of you're working out your salvation with Fear and Trembling, but working out how you encounter darkness with Fear and Trembling and how you move and how you work for goodness, because she saw Father Moore as a good man, and his goodness and the way he ministered changed her.
Yeah. And again, in the using Joseph Campbell's hero's journey language, which is borrows heavily from Jung, Carl Jung. That is her journey. Her journey is, in the orientation, in the normal order of things, she is a rising star.
Yeah.
Hard work, smart genetics. She is ready to go do and conquer. Things go sideways, disordered, broken, chaotic, because she's now sees a man who believes everything she doesn't believe in.
Right.
And yet there's something incredibly compelling about his belief and faith. She dives into it step by step, gaining more and more interest. By the end, whether it's reorientation, right, where she needs to go in the journey, she's gotten to the point where she doesn't need the ambitious striving.
Yeah. That it's transformed into something else.
It doesn't say much about religion per se, like you said, but again, it doesn't leave everything tied up with a nice bow on it. Well, that's a great one, guys. We recommend it to everybody. As always, we ask you to like us and subscribe. Give us a 5-star review if you're into this sort of thing, and love it if you would share it with your theology nerd, horror nerd, psychology nerd friends. All right, great. Now where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here?
The Last Exorcism?
Yes, we're going to go to the half mockumentary, half documentary approach to exorcism films.
Yes. Found. It's not. Is it found footage?
It must be found footage.
But
we'll get to that later.
But
For now, sweet dreams.